I would like to ask for special prayer for this sermon. This doesn't happen much, but on occasion, after I've written the sermon, I feel like it doesn't stick in my heart, and I feel like it's written well, and I feel like I should read it instead of preach it. So that's never happened to me since I've been here at Handong in the last 5 years, but it would happen previously at my last ministry. On occasion, maybe once a year, every couple years, I feel like I'm just supposed to read this. That makes me more scared than preaching normally. Just reading, but I feel that this is how I should share it. And so we'll see what God does. For those of you who would like to read along with me, again, this is available on our HIC Facebook page. We put up our blog, and so you can read along as we go through this message. How should we perform the ministry of refreshment? The ministry of refreshment. Paul has been challenging Timothy to stand firm, to be unashamed, to be willing to suffer with him for the gospel. Paul at this time is in prison in Rome and awaiting a death sentence. The persecution of Christians was rampant, and many who formerly followed Paul have now deserted him. He said, "Everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me," including two men with some very difficult, ugly names, Phygellus and Hermogenes. I say that there's one commentary that I was reading, and it said, they could not help their ugly names, but they could help their character. I was going to put that in here, but I just felt like I'd share it because it cracks me up when I think about it. We don't know who these men were. What seems clear is that they were professing believers who deserted Paul and probably encouraged others to desert him as well. Maybe like Job's friends, they declared that his sufferings proved that he was not right with God, and probably that he was not even an apostle. They were ringleaders of this desertion. However, in the midst of Paul's darkness was a bright light, a man named Onesiphorus. His name means profit-bearing or help-bringer. This man lived out his name. When Paul was deserted by others, Onesiphorus sought him out and refreshed him. The word refresh means to cool again. The Amplified Version translates it, bracing me like a breath of fresh air. Living in a world with sin means that we will always need refreshment. We all are negatively affected by trials, our sin, or the sins of others. And therefore, we'll always need refreshment. Paul was a great apostle, and he still needed refreshment. Christ, in his last hours before his death, called for his three closest disciples to come and refresh him and to pray with him. We all need this type of ministry, and we all need to offer it to others. By mentioning Phygellus and Hermogenes and then Onesiphorus, Paul calls Timothy to be like Onesiphorus, a refresher, and not like Hermogenes and Phygellus, deserters. How can we perform the ministry of refreshment? We'll learn 5 principles as we look at the example of Onesiphorus. Here's the first one. To perform the ministry, I said 5 principles, it's actually 6. Good. To perform the ministry of refreshment, we must reach out to those in need. We must reach out to those in need. Verse 15, you know that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me, including Phygellus and Hermogenes. Again, when everyone in Asia deserted Paul, Onesiphorus went to see him. People were deserting Paul because associating with him could lead to imprisonment or execution. Christians in Rome were being burned at the stake. Nero was lighting Christians on fire, putting them into the Colosseum. They were being eaten by lions. One author said this about Onesiphorus. He went to Rome at a time when every Christian was trying to get out of it. Someone said this about friendships. I read this on Facebook. In times of prosperity, our friends know us. But in times of difficulty, we know our friends. When all deserted Paul, Onesimus faithfully reached out to him, even risking his life to minister to him. We must do the same to practice the ministry of refreshment. It's hard to reach out to people in pain. We often feel like we don't know what to say. We're afraid that talking with them might feel awkward. Sometimes we're even afraid that we'll make things worse. It is good to remember that often the best thing we can do when people are suffering is simply minister to them through our presence. Like Job's friends did initially, we should do the same. Just be with them when things are difficult. Ecclesiastes 7:4 says, "The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure." The fool only wants to laugh and feel good, but the wise is drawn to the house of mourning, both to minister and to receive. Proverbs 17:17 says this, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." The author of the proverb is using Hebrew parallelism, meaning this: a real friend is like family. They are there at all times, even when we go through adversity. That's how Onesiphorus was. In order to practice the ministry of refreshment, we must reach out to others in need. Are you reaching out to those around you who are in need? Or are you staying back because you're ashamed or afraid? Here's the second principle. To perform the ministry of refreshment, we must prepare and protect our families. We must prepare and protect our families. Verse 16, Paul says, "May the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains." When Paul first mentions Onesiphorus, he does so in a prayer for his family. This implies that his family suffered in some way through Onesiphorus' ministry to Paul. No doubt they suffered by him being away, perhaps for months. Some commentators even believe that Onesiphorus was captured and killed in Rome. They come to this conclusion because of Paul's present tense prayer for the family in verse 16 and his future tense prayer for Onesimus in verse 18. He prays for him to receive mercy on that day, the day of Christ's coming or his judgment. It seems clear that at the minimum, Onesiphorus was currently not with them. He was separated either by distance or by death. If Onesiphorus was dead, it would appear that Paul is praying for the dead. Catholic commentators use this verse to support the need for believers to pray the dead into heaven. Actually, when the new pope took over, the new pope took over, he called for all the Catholics to pray the next pope into heaven. He was stuck in purgatory, they believed, which is crazy, because if the pope can't get into heaven, then who does, right? I always found that interesting. Scripture does not support belief in purgatory, nor does it support the belief that we can contribute to salvation, or ours or anyone else's, by works. Christ did everything needed for one to be saved. All we are called to do is put our faith in his work and follow him as our Lord and Savior. With that said, the point is that there was some amount of suffering Onesiphorus' family experienced because of his ministry to Paul. This is common in ministry. There is strain when a husband or wife is absent. There is extra spiritual warfare on families who serve in ministry. However, having parents who serve is healthy for children. It helps them develop a ministry mindset. delivers them from selfishness, and often leads them into a lifetime of ministry. But it's important to understand that we should never sacrifice our families for ministry. Sadly, this happens too often. Paul said our first ministry is our family in 1 Timothy 5:4, and he required for elders to run their households well, even for them to be considered for ministry. To neglect one's family means to be disqualified from serving in other ministries. How do we prepare and protect our families and have a healthy balance in ministry? I think I added 2 more points. I think there's 2 points in your notes, 2 extra points. I added 2 more this morning. One way we prepare our family is by having honest conversations. Honest conversations. That means asking them how our balance between ministry and family is going. Do they feel neglected? Are the children getting enough attention? Every semester, during the semester, and especially at the end of the semester, me and Tara have those honest conversations. And sometimes she'll be like, I don't feel like I see you. Right? And we have to kind of calibrate what's happening in the family. But those type of honest conversations are important, so you can recalibrate. Also, we prepare them for busy seasons by talking with them beforehand and committing to make up missed time. This is going to be a season. Maybe you're going to go to further school. Talking with your family, preparing them beforehand so they can be prepared for it, but also so you can make up missed time. We prepare and protect our family by constantly praying for them, even as Paul did with Onesiphorus' household. We should ask the Lord for special mercy and protection over our husbands, our wives, our children, because they are prone to the onslaught of Satan's attacks because we're serving. And so we protect our family by constantly praying for them. Here's our 4th way. We protect them by always prioritizing them over our ministry. Always prioritizing them. There will be times of sacrifice in serving God and others. Therefore, families must work together to best navigate those times of sacrifice. Edith Schaefer adds wise counsel about balancing family and ministry in her book, What is Family? Stephen Cole shares about this. As you may know, the Schaefers raised their children at L'Abri in an open home where many people came at all hours. In one chapter, Miss Schaefer describes the family as a door with hinges and a lock. The hinges open to welcome those in need, but the lock gives the family time to grow and be refreshed so they can do ministry. They did not damage their family by overcommitment to ministry, and they instilled in their children a ministry mindset. We must do the same. Our home must be like a door with hinges and a lock. We must open it to serve, but we must close it so that we can refresh and build up our families. Are you preparing and protecting your family? You must do this if you're going to do the ministry of refreshment. Here's the 3rd one. To perform the ministry of refreshment, we must persistently and practically serve others. We must persistently and practically serve others. Verse 16 and 18. May the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. Verse 18, you know very well in how many ways he helped me in Ephesus. Paul says that Onesiphorus often refreshed him in verse 16. And in verse 18, he said that while in Ephesus, Onesiphorus helped him in many ways. The word helped comes from the same word, or the same Greek word, that we get deacon from. Therefore, some commentators believe Onesiphorus was a deacon, literally means servant, in Ephesus. And while Paul was there in Ephesus, he often served him before he went to Rome. Onesiphorus served Paul in many ways and often. When Paul was hungry, no doubt he brought him food. When he was thirsty, he brought him drink. When discouraged, he prayed with him. When rejoicing, he sang with them. No doubt Onesiphorus refreshed him physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We should do the same with others. It is especially important to minister persistently in seasons of adversity, because difficulties often come in packs and often take a while to dissipate. We saw this in the story of Job. Job didn't just have one adversity, he had many adversities, family issues, job issues, body issues, and it took a while for it to go away. Trials often are like that. I think when you look at Ephesians 6 and it says that you may stand in the evil day, I think the evil day is a season. Sometimes there are seasons of problems with your family, seasons of problem with health. There are seasons. And because of these seasons, we need to be persistent in helping others, refreshing them often. That means meeting up with people sometimes often. It means listening, and listening again, even though you feel like you're hearing the same thing. It means lending a helping hand often. To refresh people, we need to minister persistently and practically. How do we do this? I think we gain insight about how to do this type of ministry by looking at the Macedonian churches and their ministry to the Jerusalem churches in 2 Corinthians. Consider what Paul said to them said about them in 2 Corinthians 8, 3 through 5. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. And they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God, also to us. Listen again what they did. They gave themselves first to the Lord and then to others. Ministry to others always comes from an overflow. If we are not abiding in Christ, living in His Word and in prayer, we cannot effectively minister to others. To serve persistently and practically, we must first give ourselves to God, then look for others in need and go and meet those needs. In considering this, we must recognize that another hindrance to the ministry of refreshment is simply selfishness. For many, their life and ministry is all about themselves. They come to a church to find encouragement, to learn about the Bible, for a good children's ministry program, and when their needs aren't met, they complain and sometimes even leave the church. It's about me. I'm here so you can serve me, and when you don't serve me, I'm leaving. That's how most people are with the church. See, for many, their focus is always me, instead of God and then others. When God is not first, we'll be even more prone to selfishness, discouragement, and even burnout in ministry. To serve persistently and practically, we must give ourselves first to God and then to others. Are you willing to refresh others by serving them persistently? Yeah, you're tired of hearing the same old story? Yes, they keep doing the same thing. Are you willing to be persistent and often refreshing them, often serving them? That's what Onesiphorus did. That's hard. To perform the ministry of refreshment, we must accept and empathize with others. We must accept and empathize with others. Verse 16, may the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. Again, Paul says Onesiphorus was not ashamed. This means that when Onesiphorus visited Paul, he didn't condemn him. He didn't say, if you just had a little bit more faith, God would break these chains. Didn't you read the story about Peter, right? How the angel came in and he was set free. If you just had more faith, he didn't say that to him. Some Christians will, right? He just accepted him as he was. This is where Job's friends failed. Initially, they just remained with him and mourned with him. When they did that, they did well. But eventually, their true colors showed. Instead of accepting Job and his suffering, they poured condemnation on him. They said his suffering was from sin, and he called him to repent. Like the Asian Christians who deserted Paul, Job's friends were ashamed of him and his sufferings. In contrast, we must accept people where they are, just as Onesiphorus did. Yes, there are times to rebuke and correct. There are times where our trials are a result of our sin, our compromise and dating relationships, and we bring the drama on ourselves. And sometimes there's a place for correction when there's irrational thoughts. But even those times need to be wisely discerned. Romans 12:15 says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn." When refreshing others, many times those hurting are primarily looking for empathy. Someone who understands them emotionally and can be beside them through the hard times. They need someone to say, it's okay to cry. It's okay. It's okay to feel betrayed. And yes, that wasn't fair. That's what we see in many of the Psalms. Honest sharing of a person or a community. However, they also need the balance presented in the Psalms where the writer ultimately says, but God. But God. Are you willing to accept and empathize with others to refresh them? I think us guys are worse at this than girls are. It's kind of like, what do I they're crying. I don't know. I think girls many times are better at that than we are. To perform the ministry of refreshment, we must accept various inconveniences. We must accept various inconveniences. Verse 17, on the contrary, when he was in Rome, he searched hard for me until he found me. He searched hard for me until he found me. When Onesiphorus went to Rome, searched hard for him. Even getting from Ephesus to Rome was difficult in those days. It was over 2,000 kilometers away, according to Google, when I looked it up, Ephesus to Rome, 2,000 kilometers. Most likely had to go by boat and by foot. However, his journey wasn't done when he got to Rome. It seems that he couldn't initially find Paul. Maybe there are many prisons in Rome, and he couldn't figure out which one. Maybe the Roman officials weren't helpful and even rude to him. Maybe, since Christians had gone into hiding because of the persecution, they were skeptical of a person searching for a prisoner of the state. In order to minister to Paul, Onesiphorus experienced various inconveniences. It's the same for us. If we're going to practice the ministry of refreshment, we must be willing to accept inconvenience. At times, it means tossing our original plans for the day to minister to someone in pain. It means going to bed at a later time, as you're getting these text messages and cacaos, or getting up earlier. At times, it means caring for a person who won't listen to you or is making bad choices. I like to call these people knuckleheads, right? And you're constantly ministering to these people that keep going the wrong direction. I'm not talking about you, Nate. I would never say that about Nate because I love him. There are various inconveniences that come with the ministry of refreshment. It's always easier just to stay home, as it would have been for Onesiphorus. However, if we're going to perform this ministry, we must accept inconvenience, at times even accept being unappreciated, which is hard. When a person is suffering or going through difficulty, he or she tends to become self-focused and selfish. This means our ministry many times will be unappreciated. Obviously, Paul was tremendously appreciative of Onesiphorus' ministry. However, that is not always the case. Christ gave his life for the world, and the majority of the world rejects him. And even Christians take him for granted and put other things over him. To do the ministry of refreshment, we must be willing to accept inconvenience. Are you willing to be inconvenienced? And maybe even unappreciated. You love them, but they won't love you back. Paul with the church of Corinth, they tried to test his apostleship. Are you even an apostle? He says, if I'm not a father, I'm a father to you. I built you. I founded the church. But yet they said, you're not even an apostle. That is very common when you refresh others. Here's the next one. The last one, and then we got two sub-point application things. To perform the ministry of refreshment, we must focus on God's reward. We must focus on God's reward. Verse 18. May the Lord grant that he will find mercy from the Lord on that day. You know very well in how many ways he helped me in Ephesus. Finally, Paul speaks a blessing over Onesimus for his faithful ministry. Mercy in this context seems to refer to receiving rewards from God at the judgment seat of Christ. It reflects the promise of Matthew 5:7. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. God's favor is on the merciful, both in this life and in the life to come. God will be gracious to them. It also reflects the blessing of God on the merciful in the parable of the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25, if you remember. At Christ's coming, he says to those who fed, clothed, and visited his brothers in prison, paraphrase, take your inheritance in the kingdom. For what you did to the least of these, you did to me. There is a reciprocal blessing with the ministry of refreshment, a reciprocal blessing. Proverbs 11:25 says, whoever refreshes others will himself be refreshed. In the context of washing the feet of others, Christ said in John 13:17, blessed will you be if you do this. When we refresh others, God promises that he will refresh hearts, which refresh us, which is important for you to understand when you're serving in ministry. Yes, it's tiring. Yes, it beats you up. Yes, the people are unforgiving. Yes, they don't appreciate you. But as you serve God and as you're faithful to refresh, God will refresh you. If we're going to perform the ministry of refreshment, we must focus on God's reward. Focusing on God's reward is especially important when our ministry isn't recognized, it's demonized, or it seems to not bear fruit. When you're serving in a Sunday school class and the kids don't pay attention or they're falling asleep, you've got to focus on God's reward. Because it's then that it's so easy to quit or give up. If you don't see that those who are merciful shall receive mercy, and those who refresh others shall be refreshed, and those who minister to Christ's brothers are in fact ministering to Christ, and he'll give them an inheritance when he comes. If you don't see that, then you'll be prone to burn out, quit, and give up. Hebrews 6:10 says this. Hebrews 6:10. God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and you continue to help them. He sees and he knows and he remembers and he rewards. Are you focusing on God's reward? If not, it'll be easy to get discouraged and quit. Here's some applications for those who are being refreshed. We talked about how to do the ministry of refreshment, but how should we respond to those who are our Onesimuses, those who constantly refresh us? Here's two principles. When refreshed, we should constantly give thanks to God and to the refresher. We should constantly give thanks to God and the refresher. We would never know about Onesimus if Paul hadn't mentioned him here in 2 Timothy. He is memorialized by Paul for his faithful ministry. Paul demonstrates his pleasure and thanksgiving before Timothy, the churches in Ephesus, and the world through this letter. It's important to be thankful for a refresher's ministry because it's so easy to take them for granted. It's kind of like most children with their parents. They birth, raise, and educate us, and yet we easily forget and neglect them. When I first went into the military at 19 years old in the Air Force, my parents had to call Red Cross to find me because I didn't call. So sinful. So easy to neglect those who refresh and care for us, right? Especially when you guys, when you're teenage years, it's kind of like you become very friend-oriented and you forget about all those who are loving you and caring for you. It's so easy, and we're like that even at this stage. My mom has to Facebook me and like, call me, right? She has to Facebook me. Tomorrow's your dad's birthday. Call him, right? It's very easy to take for granted those who do not require our appreciation or our remuneration. Do you often thank those who refresh you? Refreshers at times feel awkward when receiving appreciation. Someone says thank you, and I was really blessed by this. They often feel awkward to receive, but they're always thankful for it. They're always thankful for a thank you. They're always thankful for encouragement. They're always thankful for a note, even though at times it feels a little awkward to receive it, right? When refreshed, we should constantly remember our refreshers in prayer. We should constantly remember our refreshers in prayer, praying both for them and for their families. Paul prays twice for Onesiphorus and his family. We should do the same. Galatians 6:6 says, nevertheless, those who receive instruction in the word should share in all good things with their instructor. One of the good things we should share with those who refresh us is prayer. Pray for protection from the enemy, encouragement, intimacy with God, knowing of his word and bearing fruit. We must bless our refreshers with prayer, even as Paul did. Again, one of the temptations, one of our psychology is to start to think that, oh, my small group leader is so strong, right? My accountability partner is so strong. My leadership is so strong. So we think that we don't need to pray for them. We don't have to serve them. But Paul needed it. Christ needed it right before he went to the cross. He had to say, hey, you guys come pray with me, right? He had to go and solicit prayers before he went to the cross. Our refreshers need refreshment because they are under the onslaught of the devil, and it takes work. We must give thanks for them constantly before God and others, and we must remember them in our prayers. How can we perform the ministry of refreshment? How can we embrace people like a breath of fresh air? That's how it can be translated. Onesiphorus was like a breath of fresh air. We must reach out to those in need, even though we may feel awkward. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. We must reach out to them. We must prepare and protect our families. There's a cost that comes with ministry. We must do our best to navigate and protect those that we love and we're called to prioritize. We must persistently and practically serve others, especially in seasons of adversity, because those often tend to drag along and they need your encouragement again and again and again. We must accept and empathize with others. We must accept various inconveniences. And finally, we must focus on God's rewards. Are you a refresher? To your friends, are you like a breath of fresh air? Or are you kind of like the complainer that just brings down the atmosphere in the room and your friends? Or do you refresh others? That's what Onesiphorus was. He goes 2,000 miles to minister to someone, puts himself at cost and problems, traveling and putting himself in danger where maybe he even died, for all we know, in order to refresh others. I want to invite EPT up here, our worship team, and we're going to take some time to pray about this ministry of refreshment. I want us to take a second. Let's just pray this for our church.